Hello, Deidre.
Hi, it's been a long time. I
That's
shouldn't have left you. That's
that's
enough. That's
right.
what we're gonna get.
Yeah.
we don't. You
Got a
can tell
nice
we the
beat
hip
to
hop
step to.
generation.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
right. Hip
Well,
hop generation. All right.
Black people in
We're back
cryptocurrency
again.
back live on Facebook and YouTube, and this is going to be a great, great episode. So, would you like to
Exactly.
do the introductions to our esteemed guest?
Yes. I've been following Ashish Gadnis, who is the founder and CEO of BanQu for quite some time. I think it's at least since 2019. And I'm just amazed at what he's been doing, tackling a problem that we and Black people in cryptocurrency have talked about since the very beginning. We started a group. We said it was a big issue in both the Caribbean and in Africa. The fact that you have fundamentally large groups of people that are so in such impoverished conditions that the banks won't bank them or won't give them savings accounts, but will give them loans. So um, we knew it was a problem, and yet it's something that we say theoretically blockchain can help, blockchain can solve it. You can go direct, but to actually have a time to talk to someone who's actually doing it with this company, had a mission, had an experience, which she's going to share with us. That resulted in that. So a little background about Ashish Gadnis, born in India, uh, got a systems engineering degree from Bombay University, and also has a master's degree, MBA in finance and marketing from the Harvard Kennedy School. But basically, has a lifetime of experience in problem solving, especially when it comes to people around the world, not just on the African continent, and trying to resolve issues that relates to poverty. And it's really personal with him. So without further ado, we'd like to bring on Ashish Gadnis.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Ashish,
opportunity.
welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you for the opportunity. Blessed to be here.
Well, we're going to dive right in. It's this our form is really informal. We start with some questions, but we also look at the chat, and we go wherever the conversation takes us. But right off the bat, can you share with us, a little bit about your background in terms of before you started BanQu, some of the technological projects that you were working with?
Absolutely, yes. So, I grew up in India in the late 60s, early 70s, grew up poor like everybody else. Poverty is relative, though. My poverty in India was very different from the poverty I experienced in Africa, right? So I was middle class rich compared to that. But, I didn't have much. And when I came to the United States in 1994, came legally, if anybody's listening, you never know. I just say it, man. I say it a couple of times, came legally. But what was interesting is I think, and for the listeners, I think it's an important element of my journey that might be relevant and why it ties to what I do today is, at the end of the first month, I was able to open a bank account because I had a rent receipt, I had a pay stub, and my boss said, you can open a bank account with your light bill, rent receipt, and pay stub. And it kind of like positively energized me. I'm like, wait a minute, so somebody's recognizing my existence with these three pieces of paper, right? And fast forward, I built and sold a couple of startups. I grew up in India, which means you could beg or code. So my dad said you better code. So nothing special. I just learned how to code, and kind of helped me build a career, built and sold a couple of startups. And my last startup sold it. It was a supply chain company. We were part of the NetSuite implementation organizations, and I was done. And I wanted to kind of do something because I grew up poor. I wanted to do something with extreme poverty, but I didn't want to open a charity, right? It's just not who I am. And that kind of led me to becoming a volunteer CEO for USAID. And my first trip to Africa was to the Congo in 2013. And it completely dismantled my ego. And just to be honest and, very vulnerable here with the audience is that, once you build and sell companies, you have this giant ego. And then what I saw in Congo, kind of, I was not prepared for it. And then, if it helps, I can just very quickly share to you the incident in 2014, which was literally 20 years since my bank account opening in 1994, which is in 2014. One of these mama farmers that we were working with, I was working with USAID. I was a volunteer for USAID. She wanted to open a bank account. Now, look, women are smarter than men. If you disagree, jump off this call. But it's just a fact, right? And I have data, so happy to argue with anybody. And what was fascinating about that incident is that this mother wanted to open a bank account because she had come to recognize that we, NGOs, social enterprises, come to Africa, kind of the white knights, do good and then leave, and we look awesome getting an award, right? And at the end of the day, that mother is still in extreme poverty. She's unbankable. She cannot prove her existence. And so for me, it was this awesome, smart mother who had recognized the flaw. But the local bank said no. They said, we cannot bank her, even though, and this part is critical, right? If you never see me again, think about that mother, is that even though she had multiple United Nations ID cards, even though she had microfinance loans, which are extremely high interest rate, ridiculous. It's like payday lending. But the bank said, I cannot bank her. And the guy looks at me, he's like, I can't bank her, but I'll bank you. That's where the name comes from, in case you're wondering what BanQu stands for.
Oh.
Yeah. and for me, and just being honest here, it was kind of like a crushing moment, because my entire ego or thought process around, hey, I'm going to do something for people in poverty was destroyed, because in that moment, I was completely vulnerable. I was completely without any answers, right? And I couldn't really say, wait a minute, you should bank this mother, right? I'm a nobody. I'm nobody in Congo. I have no ability to be bankable. And that's kind of when I realized that there's a massive flaw in the global supply chain today. And the flaw is very, very fundamental, which is there are millions, if not a billion people, especially women, who live in extreme poverty in Africa, in Latin America, who work in our supply chains. This part is critical, guys, right? And I'm saying it because it's just a fact. These are the mothers who are growing your cacao. These are the mothers who are growing your barley. These are the children who are mining the cobalt that powers your smartphones. These are the same mothers on the streets of Lusaka and Zambia that are picking up your bottles that we claim to be circular. We claim to take credit for a renewable circular economy. But at the end of the day, that mother waste picker or that mother farmer cannot prove her existence in the supply chain, because the world doesn't recognize her in that supply chain. So she's not bankable, which means she does not own her economic history, which then means she will never break a cycle of poverty, and we will continue to give her aid without respecting her brilliance in that supply chain. So let me stop there, just make sure we're on the same page in terms of the problem.
So why is it that she has IDs but not identity? What was the missing piece between, you coming to America and being able to establish a bank account, and, obviously you have IDs as well, but she had all these IDs. Obviously she was employed. Obviously she was a recipient of a loan. So what was the missing piece that they're saying is missing that says that she can't be banked?
Two elements. One was this biased notion around gender, right? Which is, it happens it happens here in America, right? Mm-hmm. Women, small business owners are treated differently. But the bigger thing was, even though the identity was there, the identity did not have the economic component. It did not have the transaction identity, or what I call the economic identity, or what I call the economic passport. And that's the missing element, because if you can't prove what you do, your identity card will just say you're a refugee, or your identity card will just say you're a poor person who gets aid, right? But what is missing is the transaction identity.
So you're not paying bills.
Well, and it's exactly, and the transaction identity is what makes us bankable, right? If I told you, Dieter, walk across the street, but you can't prove your work history, you cannot prove your education history, but you have an ID card, you think a car dealership will give you a car loan? No way. Try it. So your ID is useless if it doesn't have transaction data with it.
Wow. So before we get to BanQu again, let me back up a little further.
Yes.
Because BanQu, I mean, someone would say, well, why wouldn't you just use proprietary software? What was different about blockchain as opposed to, you could have just made some type of app using traditional tech and it functioned within private supply chains. Why was it important for you to use the blockchain element of it?
So when that happened in end of 2014, right? I quit.
Mm-hmm.
I just, it was bothered me so much that I quit my volunteer role and I started traveling the world. I'm Indian, so I make fun of Indians. I'm like, there's got to be another Indian who has made an app for poor people, right? And it's just, and to your point, yes, I found a lot of people, right, Indians and others, who had app for poor people, with a singular problem though. In all of those cases, the mother had no rights to that data. Think about that for a second. So I'm going to unpack a little bit, just go a little bit like deeper, right? It's at the end of the day, if you never see me again, just recognize this supply chain example because it happens to us every day. And then I'll explain why blockchain. Put yourself in that mother's shoes and call yourself level 0 or tier 0. Mm-hmm. That mother wakes up on the Zambia-Congo border, picks up the crop and comes to sell it to a broker or a cooperative or an association that is tier 1 or level 1. They then get together and then put it on a truck, which is a tier 2 or level 2. And then it comes to a brewery, right? Simple example. Tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. In that simple example, who has the data? The cooperative might have a spreadsheet or it's on paper. The brand upstream as you go, the cacao company, the chocolate company has a database. And maybe there's an NGO that has an Excel spreadsheet or a database. In that example, at the end of the day, that mother is always at the mercy of whoever has her data, right? So if a war breaks out and all the characters leave, they leave with the mother's data. And the mother is left with a piece of paper, if that, and she's reset. So traditional databases, in my humble opinion, work in our first world context because you could say, yes, I did this, and there's a camera on a street corner that proves I did this, even though my data is with MasterCard, right? Let's take that example. But if you're on that Zambia-Congo border and you sold a 40-kilo bag of barley at 16% moisture that's going to make its way upstream to a brewery like AB InBev, and they're a client of mine, so I can share that example. Non-blockchain, who has that data? The mother does not, right? And that's kind of when I realized that traditional data systems had failed in providing the mother her rights to her supply chain information. And that's when I realized that, wait a minute, that's when I got together with my team from my past startup, my co-founder, Jeff, and I, we've been built and sold a couple of startups in the past. We started looking at the problem and said, wait a minute. If you look at the fundamental premise of blockchain, without cryptocurrency, right? Because currency is an application, in my humble opinion, right? I might be wrong, you might disagree. But the fundamental premise of the distributed ledger is that multiple parties in a transaction get a copy of the transaction, right? It's the most English description of distributed ledger for me. And that's when it hit us. It's like, wait a minute. So if the mother is at tier 0 and she has an SMS phone, not a smartphone, and if I'm running a blockchain-based supply chain software, so classic supply chain, provenance, chain of custody, yada, 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 if I can package that and send it to the mother via SMS, and her data is always on chain, we would have done something that nobody had ever done before, not to our benefit, but to the mother's benefit. I hope I'm answering your question.
No, but how is it to her benefit? She has this data. What is she empowered to do now that she has the data that proves that she is supplying resources at the 0 level to this, to anybody's supply chain? How does that empower, the farmer, the miner, et cetera?
I'll give you a live example, right? Okay. I'm always a big believer in live examples. So 2018, Zambia-Congo border, me and the AB InBev Advisor folks are standing there. We connected 300 farmers via SMS, and the farmers did not have to be trained, right? So let me take a step back, explain what BanQu does, and then I'll answer your question.
Okay.
So we run a software as a service platform, just like you access Salesforce.com, just like you access any SaaS application, but it all runs on blockchain. It runs on Ethereum. And the mother, when she is registered, she's registered only using an SMS phone because she doesn't have a smartphone.
Right.
Okay. So when she comes to sell her barley or cassava or whatever crop it is at the tier 1, it is put on blockchain and she gets an SMS message in the local language. This part is key. That says, Mama, you sold 40 kilos, 16% moisture, payout is 400 kwacha. The value of that, and there are 2 value points, is that now she has an SMS receipt that nobody can ever deny her existence in that supply chain. Number 1. Number 2, she can now prove I am an AB InBev supplier. And number 3, now this part is super important. When we did that first initial rollout, we were only doing in cash, right? In the sense that the mother had to show her PIN, then she went to a cash out point. But one of the mama farmers came to us and said, the rats still eat our money. And I was just like, I grew up in India, right? But I'm like, what kind? She's like, no, the husband or the brother or the son will take away the money. Right? And the mother says, and this is why I'm a firm believer women are smarter than men, because this is what she said. She said, if you send the money through our mobile money account, right? Africa is M-Pesa, right?
Right, M-Pesa, right.
SMS, not smartphone. She said, then I can pay for school fees. And I was just like, so 3 months later, and I can send you the video, it's viral. We did the first transaction where she sells the bag of barley and she receives an SMS message and she gets the money directly on her Momo account, on her SMS phone, and she starts laughing. And I think she's laughing at me because I'm stupid, right? I mean, that's just a fact. No, I am. It's okay. But she starts laughing, and then through an interpreter, she tells us that she's laughing because now she paid for school fees. She paid for her the solar home system bill. And that's the point where I realized that A, she's smarter than I'll ever be, but the value for the mother was more than the receipt. The value for the mother farmer is now she's building her economic passport that validates her existence. So fast forward, now the way BanQu works is a bank can enter the BanQu network and send her an SMS, says, Mama, we know you're a farmer for AB InBev, right? But we want to know how much barley you have sold. She via SMS message permissions it. Because remember, we don't own data. She owns her data. The brand owns the data, right? So when she says yes, now the bank, and this part is key, can see how much barley or crop you've sold over the last 6 months. And if they don't trust the mother, that same data exists at the brand level.
Right, exactly.
Right? So the value of the economic passport for the mother is not only that it validates her existence in the supply chain, which has been denied forever, but now she has leverage without being at the mercy of anybody else. That's the value. I'm hoping answering your question.
Yeah, it does. I'm just want to, for our audience to kind of back up a bit, because when he's saying AB InBev, America's no Anheuser-Busch. So that's what he's talking about.
Yes,
if you don't know anything about making beer, it is made with grains. It starts with grains. But in terms of, how they get paid, do they always get paid in their local currency, or do they have an option, or in terms of the ground zero?
So we have 3 options, right? And the 3 options are pure cash, and the mother gets an ATM like PIN where she can go and cash out. Second option is mobile money. So this is M-Pesa, Momo, Airtel, stuff like that, but all local currency. Third option is a bank. So for example, if you go to Zambia, Zanaco National Bank is integrated with us, and the mother has an agri bank account. The money straight goes into her bank account. We have not offered crypto yet. We can easily offer it, but we haven't, because I've not met yet the mother on the Zambia border or the
That
Uganda
needs
Sudan border who says, "Pay me in crypto because I need to feed my
Mhm.
child tonight."
Right.
Right?
Yeah, they're. I mean, to give our audience some type of perspective, when you're dealing with ground zero, you're dealing a lot of times with cattle farmers or people with the root of the resources, and they can't necessarily go and send their child off to school and pay with a cow, even though in uh, from their culture, you get married, from in Sudan, and some bride might be worth 500 cows. And so it has the cow has a currency, or within their small ecosystems, they make different trade barter resources, but then it keeps them locked out of like the global, economic sense. So this idea that they could still be the resource provider and then get a currency that can interface with the outside world is significant. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think even
Ashish,
one.
also we got a
Yes,
question on Facebook. How do you mitigate the threat of SIM swapping?
absolutely. Fantastic question. So, in most of the countries, especially in Africa, SIM cards are regulated. And SIM cards are regulated to KYC and AML laws that are enforced by the cell phone companies. So when the registration happens with the SIM card and the national ID or the photo. So if you swap it, your SIM card's not going to match with the identity baseline
Mhm.
that ties to your government ID or the photo on the BanQu platform. The one quick comment I did want to make, right? It's not just rural. If you look at our success with Coca-Cola, everybody knows Coca-Cola, right? In South Africa, in
Mhm.
the landfills of South Africa, some of the poorest, most hardworking people work that are picking up bottles, plastic, PET, right? Coca-Cola rolled us out. This is public information because they cared about the smallholder. Sorry, they cared about the waste picker, right? We work with the local organizations called Petco and Arrow. These are all local organizations. Coca-Cola locally in South Africa. And these organizations have a heart for the waste picker. And when they rolled us out and we went live in 2 weeks, the first thing that Petco, Arrow, and Coca-Cola told us that we want to make sure that the waste pickers never lose their identity or dignity. And we want to make sure that they're getting paid because we're going to get this recycling material, right? In that example, if you see our success, and this is public, that waste picker, when they come to sell their 40 bottles and 4 kilos of cardboard, the SMS message confirms the payout. And now they can cash out. And if you see, Coca Cola now has over 1 million kilos of recyclables that they know where it came from, right? And the value for the waste picker is I exist. I can prove my existence in this supply chain. I am not a number, and because I'm a waste picker doesn't mean you're going to treat me bad. And that's
Yeah,
the value.
and that's significant because I don't think a lot of Americans. I mean, I didn't know until I caught it. I think it was on CBS or some of the news report recently reported that a lot of American trash actually goes to places like Kenya and gets dumped there. So this idea that they have to clean up not only the waste that they produce, but the waste that they've accepted from other nations because they took a check because they needed a check for it. That corporations in a way will like pay them for collecting this waste. Um, so what was your, I mean, going a little bit off track, what was your aha moment? Because you mentioned, BanQu is built on top of Ethereum, but before we get to the specifics of that, what was your aha moment of going from traditional check to discovering what this Bitcoin thing was, in terms of like, when did you discover it and when did you like really like get it? Like, wait a minute, this elements of this can be used to improve systems.
It was a year long of frustration, right? And I'll give you two specific examples, right? One is my third co-founder is Somali. He's a refugee. His family was killed in Mogadishu. He spent 3.5 years in the Dadaab refugee camp. And when this 2014 incident happened, and I was chatting with him, I was chatting with my other co-founder Jeff. He said, "Ashish, it's not the farmers' issue alone. We refugees face the same problem." And I'm like, "Hamze, what are you talking about?" So we went to the Dadaab refugee camp, and he was there for 3.5 years, and he said, all I have is a piece of paper with a number on it, right? Because all his data is sitting in some UN agency's database. right?
Hmm.
Then I looked at the waste picking business and I said, wait a minute, who has all the data? So everywhere I went, I realized it was a data democracy that was missing,
Hmm.
right? And I'm going to say this with all humility. All I saw was data dictatorship. Somebody owned poor people's data, got a lot of awards. Now, I'm not saying they weren't helping, right? So I'm not poo-pooing charity. I'm just saying I never found a long-term solution out of extreme poverty in a way that created data democracy for that mother, right? And that's when I was starting to look at this distributed ledger thing, right? I'm going to date myself, right? Because we're all, it's early years, right? And I'm like, what is different about this compared to my 40 years of experience in technology, right? Because I'm old, right? So I'm in my brain, it was grounded database, you make money. Database, you make money, right? It's just.
Mhm.
But the flaw with that was that it was a singular lens. And the aha moment was kind of, in the early days where we were thinking about the problem, we said, wait a minute. The biggest difference in all of these solutions is the inequity of data. And this thing, blockchain, even if it's theoretical in those days, offers equity of data.
Mm.
And that was kind of the aha moment for me, because then it was very easy to say, wait a minute. So if there's equity of data, I buy a bag of barley from the mother. She now has proof. I leave. She always has proof. And that kind of very quickly brought it all together, because then the currency element, right? And a lot of people ask us, right? We're super green in the sense that we use Ethereum, but we don't mind the crypto, because for me, I don't really need to, right? For me, it's the mother's existence is what matters. I get paid. I make money. We're a profitable software company. We charge annual software subscription fee to the Budweisers and the Coca-Colas of the world. And the currency piece kind of became irrelevant, honestly, because I needed to have an answer for that 100 kwacha she needed, not to give her a Bitcoin wallet.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to follow up on it, because you say you're built on Ethereum, but you have a proprietary aspect. So are you saying that none of these, like fluctuating gas prices, all that kind of, that doesn't affect your business? I mean, how does that actually work?
So we run it in, what we call the binary format, right? If you're a geeky like me, and it runs across, Amazon, Azure, and Google as a SaaS application. So my cost of gas is the same cost of paying for server capacity for running a SaaS application.
Okay.
So unless those three go out of business on the same day, which will have bigger problems, I don't, if you're an Ethereum geek, remember the whole boo-ha-ha with Constantinople, right? It didn't impact us because we operate in the mindset of Linux under Red Hat, right? Because for me, I work for the mother farmer. I work for the mother waste picker. I can't say, oh my God, the crypto markets went belly up. That's how our competitors struggle, right? They can't scale because if they're trying to do social good, but they still end up owning the mother's data. And it's not me.
Wow. So, how is the banks? I mean, you mentioned you work with a bank in Zambia, but how is, and give me an idea how long BanQu has been doing this, but has there been a response from the banking industry of, hey, come over here, let us white label some stuff? Or has it been like, nah, we don't really care? What has there been feedback from banks since you've been growing like wildfire? Because you're in 40 nations, right? I mean, that's a loaded question, because I'm touching on, my brain is like jumping all over the place, but I'm just curious as to, are you sparking a change? Are they ignoring you? Are they saying, oh, that's not working? Are they surprised? I'm just curious as to banks knocking at your door. I think they should be, but just give me an idea of if any response whatsoever.
Oh, absolutely. So first 2 to 3 years, right? They were like, yeah, whatever, kind of stay in your lane, right? Then right before, the pandemic hit, they were like, wait a minute. So these farmers now can be bankable because they use mobile money. Phone companies like MTN and Airtel have banking license. So I don't need to have a bank account, because I can have a interest-bearing account on my SMS phone through MTN, a phone company, right? And then when the pandemic hit, it completely changed it to now they all started coming to us. Here's why. Because your proximity went away. And in order for you to be able to provide banking services or financial services in that supply chain, your ability to be on the ground went away, right? So you needed to go from just in time inventory to just in case inventory. This part is critical. And that's when the banks and the financial institutions realize, wait a minute, BanQu has built a network that not only empowers the farmer, but the SME, which is the small medium enterprise, which is the co-op or the truck driver, in this transparent, traceable, and equitable supply chain. So if we joined the BanQu network, and this part is critical, underline the and, the farmer is willing to let us see their data, or the SME is willing to let us see their data, right? So we're kind of the anti-Facebook, and I'm on Facebook Live, so probably get cut off at right this moment.
They don't like us
they
either.
would
That's
never.
okay. They don't like us either.
I'm going to be in trouble here. But, I mean, we don't own data, right? And I think the bank's going to realize that the ability to bank somebody in that last mile is tied to their risk. If I know how much you're growing, what is your inventory, then my risk profile goes down and I can provide you a banking product at a lower cost. So that's when they started now coming to us. And in fact, the biggest success is the Zambia one, where Zanaco was able to make payments to farmers without ever having to be in their presence, because the farmers were saying, I can show you how much I sold. And then Zambia breweries, which is AB InBev, can say, yep, I can see that same bag of barley. And it completely changed the dynamic. And so now, a lot of banks are starting to integrate with it. And not just banks, right? Financial institutions, mobile money companies, because they've come to realize that you have to bank the unbanked if you want a long-term prosperous country, right? In places in Africa. You cannot continue the continued heavy burden of interest rate on microfinance, payday lending. It's just horrible, right? And we've now shown a way to break that mindset. So kind of, I hope I answered your loaded question.
Yeah. What is the value that the brands, Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola, any of the other brands, now that they have this information from the ground zero, let's call them resource providers, why did they find that valuable? What did they need what was missing that they didn't have before?
So great question, right? And a couple of backstep points. So we're a for-profit, for-purpose company. So at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in capitalism in a way that strengthens the entire supply chain. So we're not getting rid of any middlemen, right? 80% of the middlemen love us, 20% hate us, because the 80% who love us, they realize through BanQu they're getting a QuickBooks online that allows them to prove to the Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola that I'm a small business and I'm bringing in 40,000 bottles for you, right? So, right? So now what's the value for the brand, right? And we don't sell at the farmer level or the waste picker. No, we just go to the brands and ask two simple questions. If you're the CEO of a brand and you're sourcing crops, do you know the name of the mama farmer? Most often the answer is, I don't. And two, because you don't know the name of the mama farmer, your supply chain is at least 10 to 15% expensive because of corruption, because of not knowing the inventory, and not actually planning in terms of where the crop flow is going to come from and the quality and things like that, right? So the profit and purpose comes together very easily, because the pitch is simple. Through BanQu, you're going to save money in your sourcing, and at the same time, you'll be able to meet your UN SDG goals, which is reducing child labor or gender equality, poverty. And then on the packaging side, the same pitch, except it's different in the sense that if you want to be truly claiming that we are recycling plastic, my question to you is, do you know the name of the mother waste picker on the streets of Lusaka that does recycle your bottle? Oftentimes the answer is I don't, right? It's just because supply chains are not transparent. So then the same equation is that compliance, because you're being asked as a company to prove how much plastic you are putting in the market and how much of it is coming back. It's a compliance issue, right? So if you use BanQu, you'll be compliant, but at the same time, your waste pickers will get out of poverty.
Right. And they can see the big picture. Yeah, they can compare, if something seems low unexpectedly, and there are drops, and they can be able to compare and look into further, why something happened. If there wasn't some natural disaster, was there actual theft and investigate what the situation is, because you know who the farmer is, and be like, hey, what happened? Even talk to the middle person. What happened?
But I'll give you an honest answer to you, right? I mean, for your audience, and this is, again, speaking bluntly, for every Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, right, that comes and starts working with us, there are enough companies who will not, because they greenwash. And, if you don't know what greenwashing is, I'm sure you do, but greenwashing for the audience is basically, you say you want a better world, you say you want no children in child labor, and then you come up with a nice colored brochure of an African kid, right, going to school. I'm being honest, man. It's just
that's why we're laughing, because it's so real.
It's such bullshit, right? Sorry not to swear here, but and what's the value of opening a school if the kid's actually not in school, right? Or the Supreme Court case this week, right? This week the Supreme Court said that the two big cacao companies weren't being held liable because of child labor in Malawi. And if you look at the backstory, they said, well, we don't know about child labor because we don't know who the smallholder farmer is. And I'm like, man, time out.
Hello. I'm right here.
Like, come on,
you
right?
Can find out.
Right. But look, I mean, honest conversations need to be had, right? My challenge to cacao companies or mining companies, right, is if you truly believe in a traceable and transparent supply chain, then it has to be equitable. And in order for it to be equitable, you cannot use the excuse anymore that says they're so downstream, so we don't know who our suppliers are, who are the farmers that our suppliers work with.
Yeah, right? Because it continues colonialism. When you say you don't know, but you have the technology that you could know, and it's a benefit in long term in terms of compliance with your business, then you're continuing the practices that hundreds of years ago colonialism set up, because that was the setup. It's the setup wherever it was in the world, with those who were providing the resources really get the shaft, so to speak, and don't become enriched by what they give the rest of the world.
Exactly. And we have this, and I'm being honest, right? I used to be that, right? And when the Haiti earthquake happened, I did a big fundraising, got a lot of awards, but at the end of the day, none of the material I got into Haiti was useful.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we have a romance with poverty. We have a romance with, the child's photo on your refrigerator saying we're paying, $10 or whatever a month, right? To put what we need to, is that mine? That's not mine, right?
Oh, I think it's Bob.
That was mine, yes.
You gotta wait for it to pass.
If Bob goes offline, we knew they came for him.
As long as there's not a fire in your house.
Well, you could see it before then. I mean, if you see smoke rising up first, then I might be leaving the broadcast.
But that issue, right? That's a key piece, and a lot of people don't recognize the value of blockchain in that context, right? And the value of blockchain in that context is that if you are a cacao company, or if you're a mining company that is getting cobalt and diamonds, you can't just say we don't have child labor or we are reducing child labor if you cannot prove that the children are not in school, right? Or in school, right? And we've done that. We've done, you can see our work with Japan Tobacco, where we actually capture the school attendance on blockchain within the privacy guidelines, so where the child is during the ag cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my request to companies is that if you truly want to take child labor out of the supply chain, then take the effort to know who the farmer is, and then use technologies like BanQu or others that can give you real-time information. It's the same thing in the factory setting, right? I ask a simple question. If you're a garment manufacturer, right, and you're claiming this to be recyclable material, my simple question is, do you know the name of the mother who worked in a Nigerian factory that made this t-shirt? And did she get paid? Is she out of extreme poverty? If the answer is no, then your circularity is useless.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Haiti, and one of the people, one of my clients, my past clients, was came to this country when we were about 13, Fabrice Arnon, and he is Haitian. And so when that thing hit, one of the things that he was most resentful of, he was like, you have Haitians in New York, you have Haitians in Florida, you now have Naomi Osaka. You don't have to go through all go to them to send to their families because they still have relatives that's right there. And they know it's about knowing the people and making sure they receive.
And not with this pity lens, right?
Yes.
It's like, and I think a lot of the conversations in this is blockchain for good. In my humble opinion, it's a wrong connotation, right? It's because then it has this pity notion to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't say I said we use blockchain to make the supply chain equitable.
Right.
Pure business. Because the mother is not looking for your or my pity.
Mm-hmm. And here's the reality, and here's a question for you. Many years ago when I was an undergrad in college, there's a Nigerian student, Yoruba, came to my school, and he says, sometimes I refer to your country as the fourth world. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I'm supposedly from the third world, but I grew up in the city of Nairobi. But I was really shocked to come here to see that you have poor people and that there are people in certain places. We went to school, West Virginia University. He says, I'd never imagined in my wildest dreams that I would see white kids with no shoes walking in certain, it's not all of West Virginia, just certain parts. So do you see any of what you're doing with BanQu having any impact in the so-called fourth world, which is like basically Canada, US, UK, whatever, that claims they don't have poverty, but they do have poverty situations that, we could put, because, for instance, West Virginia is a coal mining state. Obviously, they went red with the last administration, and they're quasi-red now, even under a Democrat. But part of that reason is they really don't have industry. They're trying to pay people to move there to work remote somewhere else. Because if you don't work for the university system, like there's no industry. Is there any type of ways that you could see that BanQu would work in certain communities, not just West Virginia, in the United States?
There's three actually, and one we've had some experience, but we got pushback from the local communities in terms of the bureaucracy of the governments, right? Which is, number one is homelessness, right? Mm-hmm. And this easiest to explain, and you can see we did a pilot here in Austin, and it was simple, right? It's the same concept. Instead of the mother, it's a homeless person who basically, through BanQu, now starts building their economic passport. They love it. Who doesn't like it is all the charities who now suddenly realize, wait a minute, my budget's going to get cut because I don't have to maintain a file folder for every homeless person anymore. Right? I'm being honest here, guys, right?
Yeah.
And what's the problem? Look, homelessness is a big issue in this country, right? Mm-hmm. And my simple solution to that, technologies like blockchain are not the end answer, right? It's not the silver bullet. But here's an opportunity. I'll give you a live example. If you're a homeless person on 6th Street, right, in Austin, you get picked up today and you'd be taken to a hospital because for whatever reason, right? Then you let go, and then 3 days later, you're standing in some, line for some food packet or whatever. And then 5 days later, you have an incident, you go to another hospital. Take a look at that example. 3 different incidences, but that human being is treated as a number every single time. Do your own research, right? Talk to the homeless in San Francisco and Austin and Los Angeles. They have a file and a backpack. If the backpack is stolen, you start all over again. Okay?
Right.
Easy way to solve because we're doing it in Africa. And the second one is and this is dear to my heart because I've interacted, is the young Black men and women who are incarcerated, who get out. Let's give them a basic economic passport, right? Don't treat them as numbers, right? In blockchain provides a solution, but the bureaucracy has to change, right?
Yeah.
If I get a job and I was at Rikers and I got out, I'm starting to build, my economic passport should reflect that. Today's bureaucracy in the United States doesn't allow for that, right? And then the third one is, the Native American population, right? I spent a lot of time in Minnesota, and some of the poorest, hardworking people, they're in abject poverty, right? It's all different standards, but because they don't have this economic identity, right? So it's a very applicable technology here. I think, the burden of our modernization is stopping us from implementing simple solutions in this country.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, theoretically, wouldn't it be different, easier to start with the Native American populations? I know they're being hit with a lot of payday loans as well. People just love to give them loans. But I would think they're kind of quasi outside of certain legislation, or are there blocks with that community as well?
Yeah, and it's the same problem, right? It's no different from a mother in Africa getting 3 different microfinance loans. Or take a look at India. Do your own research. In India, the farmers have been committing suicides because they have taken 3 microfinance loans from 3 different Gramins of the world, and they can't pay it back because nobody thought to say, well, let's look at the supply chain data. Let's get together as 3 microfinance institutions. No, nobody looks at that, right? Because I'm just going to lend you money and know that you're going to pay me back at the cost of something else.
Right.
It's the same problem.
All right. So tell us about, in terms of, well, actually, we have some time. Let's play a little clip. And then when we come back, the question that after Bob shows, a little promo about BanQu, the question I have is, how did you expand? And because you're not just in DR Congo, you're not just in Zambia, but you're in 40 different countries. So that kind of like, what is the difference between what's going on in the Latinx world versus India versus Africa, etc. So if Bob could play a little bit about, there you go.
Do you see blockchain here? Here? How about here? We do. We see farmers, textile workers, the disenfranchised. We see dignity through identity. We see brand new solutions to age-old problems. With blockchain, we empower the unbanked. We help brands cultivate transparent supply chains. We connect governments and NGOs back to the people they serve. At BanQu, we see blockchain differently.
Yeah, I like that. I like that little clip. It's a couple of years old, but I definitely want to give people a feel that you were international. The foundation or the inspiration may have come out of DR Congo, but tell us something more about what's going on in the rest of the world.
Yeah, so in fact, we've been very blessed. We tripled since the pandemic hit, and one of the underlying reasons was that people recognized that the people who were in poverty were getting pushed further into extreme poverty, and supply chains were getting more and more dismantled, right? And we had kind of spent so much time, money, and energy over the last 5 years building a platform, so we were able to very quickly deploy across the world. So I'll give you one specific example, right? Right before the pandemic hit, I was in Colombia in Latin America, rolling out for some of the poorest waste pickers on the streets of Bogota. These are some of the nicest people in the world, but are treated with I mean, horribly. In fact, I had a personal experience. I worked a few night shifts, and the people threw bottles at my feet, thinking I was one of the waste pickers.
Mm.
And same problem, except a whole different dimension where, at least a farmer, you don't see a farmer every day, right? But on the streets of Bogota, you're going to a bar and you're throwing a bottle, right? And what was interesting in that one example, and it's kind of stuck with me because this happened like 2 days before the pandemic hit, was when we were rolling it out for Anheuser-Busch. One young woman, she was going to be connected to BanQu. She showed me a book, right? She had a book, and I asked her, like, what is in this book? She had 3 years. Think about that for a second. 3 years worth of history, handwritten, of everything she had sold, plastic, paper. And I'm like, this is amazing, right? It's, again, higher level of intelligence. I'm just stupid. I would have never thought about it. And she's like, but nobody trusts my book.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm.
And I'm like, here we go again. Right? And she's like, because nobody trusts my book, I'm forced to pay high interest rates. I can't move my kid out of the slum. Right? So Latin America is the same problem. The bigger challenge Latin America has is Latin America does not have mobile money yet. So,
that's right.
And I think because, I don't know, whatever, the banks have a monopoly or whatever. But I think that's a new frontier that we hoping it opens up, because you can now put money directly in like an M-Pesa type account. It will break a lot of gender bias, right? Again, super honest here, right? Latino communities, or even in Africa, there's a machistas, right? And women are still treated as secondary citizens, yet they do the hardest work, right? And I think that's kind of one area where we've kind of seen quite a bit of expansion during the pandemic. We started working with the Islamic Development Bank during the pandemic, and their view was very global. They're like, hey, we want to ensure that the funding that we're going to deploy in terms of our COVID response, restructuring, and reconstruction, we want traceability. And, our platform did that from get-go. And in the same thing in Asia, right? So I think what we have kind of learned, to now answer your question, right? While our lens really started in Africa, the problem, if you look at sourcing and distribution, right, which is, packaging, it is same no matter what geography. The gender inequality is the same. And the forced labor or child labor is the same. And so now the approach we're taking is we're hoping more brands recognize that if you want to be a sustainable business, right, which is like everybody's saying it, then be deliberate about your supply chains, because you can't run sustainability in a vacuum, because then you're taking like a corporate social responsibility. You'll cut a check to an NGO, you'll get a fantastic color brochure, and
greenwash.
No, look, you probably never. Never invite me again, because I just, stuff just comes out. But I'd rather just.
I just can't believe the bias you have against colored brochures is just.
It's so pretty. The kids smile.
Someone has to stand up for those printers too,
Yeah, but it is a real problem. People will get comfortable in the way they do things, but they don't have any. I don't know if it's empathy or just can't even relate to the fact that they're just spinning wheels and not solving problems. So that was part of the big reason why we wanted you have here, because you were really tackling a problem. So I've seen you say in another interview that you are profitable. Maybe some of our audience wants to know, are you hiring, and in what areas?
So, we're always looking for good people, right? So it's like, we're kind of the big belief that, we're not set on a certain job description per se. For us, it's, when we meet people, you have to have that deep down passion for purpose, right? Because the job in terms of the software and the technology, those are all skills trained, right? And we have the philosophy, which is, like the Apple Steve Jobs philosophy, which is hire extremely smart people and tell them, to tell you what to do, right? Right. And so for us, as we are growing, we're always looking for people who can be in these markets, right? Who can open up markets for us. right, who can be in LATAM and Africa and Asia, who recognize that there is a sugar farmer that's connected to a large corporation, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of, we don't have like a set pattern of we're going to hire X amount of people. We just hired an amazing young lady to lead our Latin America implementations. So it's, if somebody wants to ping me, happy to have a conversation. For me, I
Yeah,
look for the heart.
yeah, we've had in the past one of our admins who's not really, for people watching for the first time, we were launched on Facebook in September 2017, and we're mostly a discussion group, and we've been producing live streams since 2017 as well to get people to know, what's going on in the space. But one of our admins is actually John Karanja. I don't know if you know John Karanja is head of BitHub Africa.
Oh, I
GitHub
don't.
yeah, accelerator. But he part of the GitHub Africa's mission is like training people in blockchain, training Africans in blockchain in particular or whatever. So I'll tell him to reach out with him. They're
Yes.
actually working on their own solar powered blockchain. They forked a part of Bitcoin and putting a protocol on top, and want to, basically empower rural Africans to be able to collect solar energy credits and use that as a type of monetary system.
In fact, we actually did, we opened an office in South Africa last year. So
Okay.
yeah. So we
Yeah,
have
well,
a full-time
he's in
team.
Kenya.
Oh,
I think he's
fantastic.
mostly in Kenya, and one of his partners is from Congo.
In
Christian
fact,
Kadoba,
our
stuff like that.
entire South Africa team is based in Johannesburg, and one of
Mm-hmm.
the team members is from Zambia, one of the team members is from Zimbabwe, one of the team members is from Congo. They all live in South Africa. So no, for
Right.
us, look, I mean, our dream is to be $100 million profitable software company, but also
Mm-hmm.
enable 100 million people out of poverty. And we know 50% of that is going to happen on the Africa continent. So that's why we opened an Africa office last year.
Exactly. How many offices do you have?
So we're all virtual, right? So because of the pandemic, but we have people in Colombia, France. We have people in Eastern Europe. We have people in South Africa. I'm in Texas. Our corporate headquarters is Minneapolis. Our board is in New York.
Wow. And before we leave, because you did mention you have two co-founders, tell us something, because you're the face I see most often. So I don't even know. I'm like Jeff and some other guy. I'm like, tell us a little something so that people know.
Absolutely.
Like, oh yeah, you're BanQu.
No, and they're gonna hate me for saying this, but so I'm the outside CEO, right? I'm the crazy guy, but I'll be honest, right? We would not have a profitable company if it wasn't for my co-founder. So my co-founder is Jeff, and he is the inside CEO. So everybody works for him. Nobody works for me. Look at me, right? I'm just not a good idea, right? But for me, I want to be out there because but he's the brains, right? You need both. You need both sides, right? And then Hamza, he is. He's actually very well known in the Somali community. He's actually part of the Minnesota state government. He runs the diversity, whatever they call it. But he's also, so what his job is really, he kind of really helps us connect with the refugee communities, the displaced communities, and things like that. So, we kind of, all kind of have different pieces of the puzzle. Jeff's the inside CEO, I'm the outside CEO, and Hamza is the guy, who kind of represents kind of the displaced, the refugees, and then I'm kind of out there, working with brands and things like that. So there's a lot more smarter people than me at BanQu. I'm just honest.
Okay.
Well, that's the best position to be in. Well, we absolutely would love to have you back. You hit all the right notes with us. So, it's really important to tackle and address the problems and know that you can fix them versus, brushing them under the rug. So I'm glad you took some time with us to give us some insight on BanQu. And definitely looking forward to, more progress, especially if you start hitting up the Caribbean. We'd love to see, places like Haiti get out of the situations that
ocean plastic. Haiti needs to solve ocean plastic.
Ocean plastic. Oh, okay.
There's a lot of poor people in Haiti who are picking up ocean plastic that the rest of the world gets credit for, but those poor people are not. If you know anybody, I can solve that problem.
Well, I can put you in touch with. I'll reach out to Fabrice Arnon, who's actually based in New York, but he's always doing stuff, back in his native Haiti, because he's another person that grew up, basically impoverished and then came to the United States and then going to Colombia and stuff like that. So there's always that tug when you have that personal firsthand experience of being without, and then when you get in the West, you're having a good time, but you feel that connection to that there's somebody like me still in my home country that it needs to be fixed. But absolutely, thank you, Ashish Gadnis, for taking some time, from answering a question from Tony Carter, and everybody, look out for BanQu and support what they're doing. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Okay.